Victor Lansk was born in a narrow, quiet street in Vienna, Austria. His family didn't have much. His father was a tailor, and his mother cleaned houses. They weren't poor, but life was simple, and every little thing had to be earned. Victor was a quiet boy in his early years, but one thing made him different: his love for sounds. While most children played with toys, Victor sat by the window listening to the sounds of the world outside. Carriages rolling, birds chirping, raindrops hitting the windowsill. Everything became music in his mind. One day when he was about 6 years old, his mother brought home an old piano. It was second-hand, with chipped keys and a dusty surface. A family she cleaned for was moving, and they had decided to throw it away. She thought maybe it could be useful for something, even though no one in their house played. When Victor first saw it, his eyes lit up. He didn't say a word, but he walked over to the piano and touched the keys gently as if they were made of glass. From that day on, Victor became a different child. He would wake up early and go to the piano before school. In the evenings, he would skip dinner just to sit and play. At first it was just random pressing, noise to others. But soon something changed. The random notes started sounding like melodies. His fingers began to move with purpose. Even though he couldn't read music, he played like he had been born to do it. His parents didn't know much about classical music, but even they could tell this boy had something special. A local music teacher named Herr König heard about the child prodigy who played by ear and came to see for himself. After just 5 minutes of listening, he offered to teach Victor for free. That's how Victor began formal lessons. He learned fast, very fast. In just a year, he was playing pieces that most teenagers struggled with. By the time he was 10, he had already won his first junior competition. Victor liked winning. He liked the feeling of being the best, the applause, the attention, the shining trophies. They became his fuel. Every time someone clapped, it felt like his heart beat louder. But something else also began to grow inside him. Pride. He wasn't just proud of his skills. He started thinking he was better than everyone else, especially those who couldn't keep up. By age 15, Victor had performed in front of large audiences. At 17, he traveled to Germany, France, and Italy for competitions. In every city, he stunned crowds. Critics praised him as a storm in a suit, a machine, with a human soul and the future of classical music. He always wore a black tuxedo, always kept his hair neatly slicked back, and always had the same smirk when he won. People called it confidence. But in truth, Victor had started believing that no one, absolutely no one, could be better than him. Victor didn't have many friends. Other musicians found him too arrogant. He rarely spoke to fellow competitors, and when he did, he often made sarcastic comments about their technique or style. He didn't care. In his mind, he was born for greatness, and others were just trying to catch up. His teachers warned him to stay humble, but he didn't listen. After one performance, when a female pianist named Sophia received more applause than him, Victor walked out of the concert hall in silence. Later, in an interview, he said, "She's good, but she plays like she's afraid of the piano. Music needs strength, not softness." As he grew older, his comments became bolder. He began saying things that stirred controversy. In one radio interview, when asked if he thought women could match his skill level, Victor laughed. "No," he said. "They're too emotional. Music is about discipline, not feelings. They get distracted. I've never met a female pianist who could play a Liszt piece without losing herself halfway through." The interviewer tried to challenge him, but Victor stood by his words. He didn't care what people thought. He believed he was telling the truth. His fan base grew. Some loved his confidence, calling him a classical rock star. Others hated his attitude, but admitted his skill was unmatched. Videos of his performances went viral. He had millions of views, thousands of followers, and countless admirers. But among the applause and praise, there was also anger. Many young female pianists felt disrespected, hurt, and even humiliated by his words. Music schools, forums, and social media platforms buzzed with discussions about his arrogance. Yet Victor continued. He believed that if he kept winning, no one could touch him. And he was winning. One trophy after another, one competition after the next. In the world of classical music, Victor Lansk had become a household name. He released an album titled Perfection, and it topped classical charts for weeks. He performed with famous orchestras and was invited to speak at elite music schools. But the more success he gained, the more unkind he became. Then came the big announcement. A European-level piano competition was being organized in Berlin. The theme was Emotion versus Technique. The winner would not only receive a large cash prize but also a worldwide tour and a contract with a major classical label. The best part? It was open to anyone. Professionals, students, street performers, anyone with talent could apply. The judges included famous composers, music critics, and past legends. Victor was the first to apply. Not only did he apply, but he also went public again with another sharp comment. On national television, during a morning talk show, the host asked, "Do you think you'll face tough competition this time? Maybe from someone unexpected?" Victor smiled and said, "I don't mind surprises, but I know one thing for sure. No woman is going to beat me. Not in this lifetime." His words were shared across the internet. Some clapped, some laughed, but many were shocked. Music schools across Europe reacted. Female musicians posted response videos. Hashtags like #Challenge Victor and Not Afraid to Play started trending. People from all over began submitting their applications to the competition, not just to win, but to prove him wrong. Victor didn't care. In fact, he welcomed it. He said the challenge would be fun to watch. For him, it wasn't just a competition anymore. It was a stage to confirm his belief that he was not only the best pianist, but also the most powerful. In his private life, Victor practiced more than ever. He selected the most complex and technically demanding pieces for the competition. He rehearsed daily with his personal orchestra, trying new variations, mastering every single note until there was no room for error. He trained like an athlete preparing for the Olympics, because for him, this wasn't about music anymore. It was about pride. While others waited nervously to be selected, Victor was already preparing his victory speech. What Victor didn't know, what none of the world knew yet, was that in a small Polish town, someone was practicing too. Not for pride, not for revenge, and not even for competition. She was practicing for the love of music. She had no followers, no interviews, and no spotlight. She didn't even own a real piano. And she had never seen Victor's face. Not because she wasn't interested, but because she had been blind for most of her life. But soon, their paths would cross. And everything Victor believed about music, competition, and women would be shaken to the core. All it would take was one performance, and a blindfold. In a quiet village in the Polish countryside, far away from the noise of cities and crowds, lived a woman named Eliza Kowalska. She was 32 years old and known in her town not for fame or fortune, but for something much deeper: her beautiful music. Eliza had been playing the piano since she was a little girl, even though her journey had been far from ordinary. Her life was not shaped by stages, trophies, or competitions. Instead, it was shaped by silence, by sound, and by the darkness she had learned to live in. When Eliza was just 8 years old, a rare neurological condition began to take away her sight. At first, things just looked blurry. Then shadows faded, and colors disappeared. Doctors in Warsaw tried everything, but by the time she was 9, Eliza had lost her vision completely. Her parents were devastated. They didn't know how she would go to school, play with other kids, or live a normal life. But Eliza surprised everyone. She never cried. She simply listened. She had always loved the old upright piano in her house, a gift from her grandmother. Her mother used to play lullabies on it when Eliza was a baby. After she went blind, the piano became her world. She began spending hours at it every day. With her fingers, she explored what she could no longer see. The keys spoke to her in ways people couldn't. Every note was a word, every chord a sentence. She didn't need eyes to understand music. She could feel it. She didn't just memorize pieces. She listened to them, over and over, absorbing every rise and fall, every pause and whisper. Her father taught her how to move around the house without bumping into things. Her mother recorded books for her on tape, but no one taught her music. That, she taught herself. She couldn't read sheet music, but she could remember hours of compositions just by listening to recordings. Her memory was sharp, and her emotions were even sharper. Music became her way of seeing the world, of understanding people, of expressing what words could not. By the time Eliza was 15, she was playing pieces that most conservatory students struggled with. Chopin, Mozart, Debussy, Rachmaninoff, she played them all. But she didn't perform for fame or for crowds. She played for people who needed healing. She played in hospitals, in elderly homes, in churches, and sometimes just by the riverside in her village, where the wind carried her music far beyond what her ears could hear. The villagers adored her. Some called her an angel. Children sat quietly when she played, and old men wiped their eyes. Eliza never asked for money. She believed music was not a business. It was a gift to be shared, not sold. She gave lessons to local children for free, especially those who couldn't afford a piano teacher. Her only wish was to keep playing, to keep feeling, and to keep giving. She had no interest in competitions. In fact, she disliked them. She believed that music should not be measured like a race or judged like a contest. Her parents sometimes wondered what might have happened if she had gone to a big city or entered one of the famous music schools. But Eliza had no desire to prove anything to anyone. She lived simply, quietly, and with great peace in her heart. One day, her old music teacher, Mrs. Nowak, visited her after many years. Mrs. Nowak had once taught piano in Krakow, but had retired and returned to her hometown. She had known Eliza since she was a child, and had always been amazed by her talent. During their tea, she mentioned a major piano competition happening in Berlin. It was open to all. She explained how a well-known pianist named Victor Lansk had made some terrible comments on television, saying that no woman could beat him, and that women were too emotional and weak to handle strong music. Eliza didn't react much. She just smiled sadly and said, "That's unfortunate. He must not have heard the right music yet." But Mrs. Nowak was angry. "You should enter, Eliza. You could show him. The world needs to hear you." Eliza shook her head. "That's not why I play. I don't want to prove anything." Mrs. Nowak understood, but she also knew the world needed voices like Eliza's. Quiet strength, hidden power, and graceful defiance. So without telling Eliza, she recorded a video of her playing Chopin's Ballade No. 1, one of the most emotional and challenging piano pieces ever written. She sent it to the competition organizers, along with a simple note. She plays from the heart, not from the ego. And she does it without seeing the keys. Weeks passed, and Eliza forgot all about it. She continued teaching the village kids and playing at the hospital. Then, one morning, a large envelope arrived by post. It was thick and official-looking. Her father read it aloud. It was an invitation to the competition in Berlin. She had been selected as one of the 20 finalists from across Europe. Eliza was stunned. At first, she refused. She told her parents she had no interest in going. "That's not my place," she said. "I don't belong on a stage with people like him." But her father said gently, "Maybe this time, the stage needs someone like you." Eliza thought about it. Not for her pride, not to compete, but maybe to remind people what music was truly about. Maybe someone in that audience would listen with their heart and remember the beauty that music can bring. Not just perfection or power, but soul and truth. With a quiet yes, she agreed. The village came together to help her. They raised money for the train tickets. A local tailor stitched her a simple but elegant black dress. Children made her a small good luck card filled with drawings and messages. Her mother packed her a small bag with everything she might need. And on a cold morning, with the sun rising gently behind her, Eliza boarded the train to Berlin with her father by her side. The city was overwhelming. Tall buildings, loud streets, and 1,000 faces she could not see but could feel all around her. The competition was being held in a grand concert hall. Golden lights, polished floors, giant chandeliers. When she entered, people stared, some out of curiosity, others with confusion. She held her cane in one hand and her father's arm in the other. The organizers were polite but clearly unsure. They hadn't realized she was blind. One judge whispered, "How will she manage on stage?" Another said, "Is this even fair?" To the others? But when Eliza sat at the rehearsal piano and began to play, the room fell silent. Even the judges stopped moving. Her fingers floated like feathers, but her music struck like lightning, gentle, strong, full of emotion. One judge quietly said, "She doesn't need to see. She makes us feel." Victor Lansk arrived the next day with his usual confidence. Dressed in a sleek black suit, followed by reporters and fans, he laughed when someone told him about the fair, Blind Pianist. "What is this? A charity story?" he said. "She's playing blindfolded? That's just a trick. A performance stunt. I came here to compete with real musicians." Eliza didn't hear his words directly, but she could feel the mood. She had learned long ago that silence can speak louder than sound. She ignored the whispers, the doubts, and the looks. She spent her time in her hotel room practicing gently, feeling the keys under her fingers, breathing through the notes like they were old friends. When the names of the finalists were announced, her name was last. People clapped politely. Victor's name received the loudest cheer. Reporters called him the favorite to win, and everyone expected him to dominate. But something had already begun to shift. Even in the practice halls, other contestants noticed Eliza. Some stopped to listen. Some closed their eyes as she played, just to feel it deeper. She never spoke much. She never asked questions or gave opinions. She just played. And her music spoke for her. Back home in the village, people gathered in the community center to watch the competition on television. They brought food, candles, and blankets. They waited for their Eliza to appear on the big screen. They didn't care if she won. To them, she had already won. By being there, by playing her way, by simply staying true. Eliza didn't want to defeat anyone. She just wanted to be heard. Not for fame, not for revenge, but for something purer. She believed music was not about who plays faster or louder. It was about who plays with honesty. She didn't need eyes to see that, and soon the rest of the world would see it too. The evening of the competition finally arrived, and the Berlin Grand Concert Hall was filled with people. Music lovers from different countries, famous critics, top musicians, and hundreds of curious visitors sat in their velvet seats, waiting for the show to begin. The stage was beautifully lit, with a single grand piano standing under the spotlight. The entire hall was quiet, as if even the air itself was holding its breath. Backstage, the atmosphere was completely different. Contestants were nervous. Some were practicing with their fingers in the air, others were whispering silently to calm themselves. Victor Lansk stood apart from the rest. He wasn't nervous. He wore a perfect black tuxedo and shiny black shoes. His hair was perfectly styled, and his posture was straight and confident. He looked around at the other contestants with a calm smile, like a king among commoners. Victor was scheduled to perform last. He had specially requested the final slot. He believed it was the most powerful position in a concert, the last performance people would remember. He said in an interview earlier, "Let them warm up the crowd. I'll finish with fire." Eliza waited quietly in a corner of the dressing area. Her father sat beside her, holding her hand. She was calm, as always. Her long black dress had been pressed neatly, and her hair was tied in a simple braid. She didn't seem nervous, even though she could feel the energy of the hall around her. People passed by, some whispering to each other after seeing her cane. Some stared. Some ignored her. But Eliza didn't mind. She had lived in silence long enough to understand which sounds were important. The host walked onto the stage and welcomed the audience. He introduced the judges and explained the competition rules. Each finalist would play one classical piece and one personal choice. They would be judged on technique, expression, originality, and stage presence. The winner would be announced the next day. The first few performers played beautifully. Each one received polite applause. Some were students from top academies. Some were self-taught musicians. Some had come with dreams, others with confidence. The hall respected each performance, but none shook the room. When it was Eliza's turn, the host paused for a moment. He looked a little unsure, but then cleared his throat and said, "Now performing, Eliza Kowalska, from Poland." There was a soft whisper in the audience. Some people leaned forward. A blind pianist? Some expected it to be a sad story. Others were curious. Some were skeptical. Eliza walked onto the stage slowly, guided by her father. She held her cane with one hand and her father's arm with the other. Her steps were calm, steady. She didn't rush, didn't smile, didn't try to win attention. But somehow the silence grew deeper as she approached the piano. The spotlight followed her and the entire hall seemed to lean in. Her father helped her sit at the piano bench and placed her hands gently on the keys. Then he stepped back, gave her a small nod, and walked off stage. Eliza took a deep breath. Then, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a black ribbon. With graceful hands, she tied it around her eyes, covering them completely, even though she was already blind. Gasps filled the room. People looked at each other in shock. Why was she blindfolding herself? Victor, watching from backstage, narrowed his eyes. "She's making a show of it," he muttered. But Eliza wasn't doing it for drama. She was doing it for truth. She didn't want pity. She didn't want people to think she was fragile. She wanted them to listen, not to her story, not to her struggle, but to her music. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The first few notes were soft, almost like a whisper. Then they grew stronger. The melody rose and fell, like a wave. It wasn't just notes. It was emotion. It was breath. It was memory. Every finger movement had meaning. Every chord was full of feeling. She played Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, but not like anyone else. She didn't play it like it was written on paper. She played it like it lived inside her. The hall was frozen. Not a cough. Not a whisper. Not even the sound of a chair moving. People closed their eyes. Some had tears in them without realizing. Judges leaned forward in their seats. Even the camera crew forgot to zoom in. Her fingers danced, floated, thundered, and whispered. The music spoke of loneliness and hope, of pain and peace. It was not loud, but it was powerful. Not perfect, but pure. And when she finished, she lifted her hands gently from the keys and sat quietly for a moment before removing the blindfold. Then she stood, bowed once toward the crowd, and walked off stage slowly. The hall exploded into applause, not polite clapping, real, thunderous, heartfelt applause. People stood. Some shouted her name. Some cried. The judges whispered to each other with wide eyes. Backstage, Victor was stunned. He hadn't expected that. She got lucky, he said to himself. That was one piece. I'm still the main act. Then the host returned to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one final performance tonight. Victor Lansk, from Austria. The crowd clapped again, though not as loudly as before. Victor walked onto the stage with pride. He adjusted his cuffs, bowed deeply, and sat at the piano like he owned it. He had chosen one of the most complex Liszt pieces ever written. Fast, fiery, technical. He began with speed and strength. His fingers moved like lightning. The keys seemed to obey him. The hall watched with amazement. He was brilliant, powerful, perfect. But something was missing. After Eliza's performance, Victor's playing sounded empty, loud but hollow, fast but cold. He showed mastery, but not soul. The crowd still clapped when he finished. Some stood, but not as many. The judges nodded but didn't whisper this time. Victor bowed proudly and walked off stage. But he felt something strange. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure he had won. Backstage, he passed Eliza. She was sitting quietly with her father. He paused, then said, "Nice performance, but blindfolds are not music." Eliza turned her face toward his voice. "I wasn't trying to be seen," she said softly. "I was only trying to be heard." Victor didn't reply. The next morning, newspapers across Europe exploded with headlines. Blind pianist shakes Berlin concert hall. Heart over hands. Eliza Kowalska's unforgettable performance. Victor Lansk meets his match. Clips of her performance went viral online. Social media flooded with praise, admiration, and emotion. People shared her story not just because she was blind, but because she had reminded the world of something important. Music is about feeling, not just skill. Victor watched the news in silence. For the first time in his career, he felt something strange in his chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy. It was something deeper, something uncomfortable. Doubt. He had always believed he was unbeatable. But now, a quiet woman who couldn't see had shown him a truth he had long forgotten. Music wasn't about showing off. It was about showing something real. And for the first time, he wasn't sure he had done that. The next morning in Berlin was cold and quiet, but inside the grand hotel where all the finalists stayed, the air was full of excitement. People walked quickly through the halls, talking in low voices. Contestants were getting dressed. Makeup. Artists were fixing clothes and hair, and organizers were busy checking the final details for the awards ceremony. The main concert hall had been decorated with fresh flowers, golden banners, and red carpets. Soon, it would be full of journalists, cameras, and people waiting to hear the final results. Eliza woke up early, long before the sun came up. She sat, near the window of her hotel room, listening to the city sounds outside. Cars passing, birds singing, a soft wind blowing. She held her hands over her lap and touched her fingers gently. They were a little tired from the long performance the night before, but she didn't mind. She had played with her heart. That was all that mattered to her. Her father brought her some tea and sat beside her. "You were wonderful," he said in a calm voice. Eliza smiled. "I just played the way I always do." Her father didn't reply. He simply squeezed her hand. He knew she wasn't thinking about winning or losing. She never cared for trophies or applause. But this time, things were different. This time, the whole world had listened. For the first time in her life, millions of people had heard her play, and they had felt something. Downstairs in the breakfast area, many of the other contestants were talking about Eliza. Some were amazed, others confused, and a few were a bit jealous. But none could deny that something very special had happened the night before. One girl from Italy said, "I couldn't stop crying during her performance. It was like she was telling a story without any words." Another boy from Sweden added, "She played like she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just wanted us to feel." Victor Lansk, however, didn't join the others. He stayed in his room, staring at the television where news channels kept playing clips of Eliza's performance. Headlines filled the screen. A new star in the world of music. Blind pianist breaks hearts in Berlin. Victor Lansk. Overshadowed by emotional performance. He turned off the TV with a click. He had never lost before. Never in his life. Since he was 10, he had won every competition, every title, every trophy. He was called a genius, a master, a prodigy. And now, all of a sudden, people were talking about someone else, a woman who couldn't even see the piano keys. He stood up and looked in the mirror. His suit was perfect. His shoes were polished. His hair was flawless. But his eyes looked tired, unsure. For the first time, Victor Lansk didn't feel certain. He felt something like fear, but not of losing. Fear of being forgotten. The awards ceremony began in the afternoon. The audience returned to the concert hall, dressed in suits and gowns. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered into microphones. The finalists sat in the front rows, each wearing a name tag. Eliza sat quietly between her father and Mrs. Nowak, who had come from Poland just to support her. The judges walked onto the stage and sat behind a long table. One of them stood up and began a short speech. "We heard beautiful music last night. Every finalist showed talent, hard work, and courage. But one performer reminded us of something deeper, of what music truly means, not only sound, but soul." The crowd became silent. People leaned forward in their seats. "We would now like to announce the winner of this year's Grand European Piano Award." A soft drum roll played through the speakers. Everyone held their breath. Eliza Kowalska. There was a pause, just a second or two, and then the entire room burst into applause. People stood up. Some clapped wildly. Others had tears in their eyes. The cameras pointed toward Eliza. She didn't move at first. Her hands trembled slightly. Her father whispered, "They called your name." She nodded slowly, then stood with his help and began walking toward the stage. As she reached the steps, the host came down and offered his arm to guide her. She climbed the stairs calmly, her long dress flowing behind her. The judges all stood and clapped. She was handed a crystal trophy shaped like a piano key and a bouquet of white roses. She bowed gently and turned toward the microphone. "I don't have a big speech," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I just want to say thank you for listening. I've never played for crowds or awards. I play because music helps me see the world, and I hope that last night it helped some of you see it too." The applause grew louder. People rose to their feet again. Victor Lansk sat frozen in his seat. He clapped slowly, politely. But inside, his mind was racing. How could this happen? How could someone like her, someone without sight, someone unknown, win over a crowd that once loved him? He left quietly before the ceremony ended. Outside the hall, a group of fans waited for Eliza. They gave her handwritten letters, asked for autographs, and even requested photos beside her. A young girl came forward, holding her mother's hand, and said, "I want to learn piano like you. I want to feel the music." Eliza knelt and touched the girl's hands. "Then close your eyes when you play," she whispered. "It helps. You listen better." That night, back at the hotel, she sat in her room with her father and Mrs. Nowak. They didn't talk much. They drank tea and looked out at the lights of Berlin. Her father finally said, "You know the world will want more. Now. More concerts, more stories. Are you ready for that?" Eliza was quiet for a moment. "I didn't come here to become famous. I came because I wanted to remind people that music is not just sound. It's feeling. It's truth." Mrs. Nowak smiled. "Then maybe it's time the world learned to feel again." Meanwhile, across the city, Victor sat alone in a dark hotel room. The trophy he had expected to win wasn't in his hands. The spotlight he had counted on had moved to someone else. He didn't sleep. Instead, he listened, really listened, to a recording of Eliza's performance, again and again. At first, he heard only her notes. Then, something deeper. Her silence between the notes. The breath in her fingers. The honesty in her rhythm. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, felt what he had missed. It wasn't technique that beat him. It was truth. And for Victor Lansk, that realization was more powerful than any defeat. After the big win at the Berlin Grand Concert Hall, Eliza's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The trophy in her hands was not just a symbol of victory. It was a key to a new world. A world full of opportunities, challenges, and new kinds of attention. Suddenly, she was no longer just a talented pianist from a small town in Poland. She was a symbol of hope and inspiration to many people, especially those who had faced difficulties and believed their dreams were impossible. The day after the ceremony, newspapers, magazines, and TV channels across Europe and beyond were filled with stories about Eliza Kowalska. They told how a blind pianist had stunned the world by playing beautifully blindfolded, showing courage, talent, and heart. People from many countries sent letters, emails, and messages, congratulating her and asking for advice. Many young musicians, especially those with disabilities, said Eliza's performance gave them strength to keep practicing and dreaming. Despite the sudden fame, Eliza remained humble and calm. She understood that the spotlight was bright but also fragile. She knew that true success was not only about applause or awards, but about touching people's hearts through music. So she continued practicing every day with the same dedication and passion as before. Victor Lansk, on the other hand, found it hard to accept his defeat. For years he had been proud of his skill, speed, and control over the piano. He had believed that no one could challenge him, especially not a woman, and certainly not someone who could not see. But Eliza's win made him question everything. He realized that technical perfection alone was not enough to move people. There was something more important: authenticity, emotion, connection. Victor tried to change. He began listening to different kinds of music, reading about emotions, and trying to understand what made Eliza's performance so special. At first, it was difficult for him to open his heart and leave behind his arrogance. But slowly, he started to respect Eliza, not just as a competitor but as an artist. Meanwhile, Eliza's career blossomed. Invitations to perform at famous concert halls around the world began pouring in. She traveled to Paris, London, New York, Tokyo, and many other cities, sharing her music and her story. Each time she played, she reminded audiences that music was more than just notes. It was a language of the soul. Her concerts became events where people came not only to hear, but to feel and to connect. One of the most special moments came when Eliza was invited to play at a charity event for children with disabilities. The hall was filled with young boys and girls, some with wheelchairs, some with hearing aids, and others with various challenges. As Eliza played, she noticed how their faces lit up, how their eyes sparkled with hope. After the concert, many children came to her asking questions, sharing their dreams, and thanking her for inspiring them. Eliza realized that her journey was not just about personal success, but about changing the world's attitude toward people like her. She started working with organizations that helped blind and disabled children learn music. She taught them that even if the world seemed dark or difficult, music could bring light, joy, and freedom. Victor and Eliza's paths crossed. Again, but this time not as rivals. Victor had learned humility and respect. He invited Eliza to join him in a special concert that would celebrate music's power to unite people from different backgrounds and abilities. The concert was called Harmony Beyond Sight, and it became one of the most talked-about events in the music world. On the night of the concert, the stage was set with two grand pianos side by side. Victor wore a simple black suit, and Eliza wore a white dress. When they began to play together, it was magic. Victor's technical brilliance combined with Eliza's emotional depth created music that felt alive and new. The audience was moved to tears. It was a moment of true connection between two very different artists, and between the music and the people who listened. After the concert, Victor publicly thanked Eliza for teaching him what real music was. He said, "She showed me that music is not a contest but a conversation, not a battle but a gift." Eliza smiled and replied, "And you showed me that even the proudest heart can learn to listen." Their friendship grew stronger, and together they worked to create programs that promoted music education for disabled children all over the world. They believed that everyone deserved a chance to express themselves through music, no matter what obstacles they faced. Years passed, and Eliza's story became a legend. She was invited to speak at schools, conferences, and international events. She wrote a book about her life and music, which became a bestseller. More importantly, she never stopped playing. She never stopped teaching, and she never stopped believing that music could change the world. Her journey from a small blind girl with a dream to a world-famous pianist showed people everywhere that true greatness is not about talent alone, but about courage, heart, and the willingness to be seen for who you really are. Eliza's life proved that sometimes the brightest light comes from the darkest places, and that a single melody, played with truth and feeling, can defeat even the most arrogant pride. Victor, once the unbeatable champion, became her greatest supporter, and together they changed how the world saw music and each other. This story reminds us all that no matter how many challenges we face, no matter what others say, our true strength lies in believing in ourselves and in the power of our unique voices. And sometimes, the most beautiful music is made not by those who see the notes, but by those who feel them deep inside.